Good morning. My name is Adam Romney, and Reverend Andy had a few words he wanted to pass along at our meeting today. Reverend Andy writes, "I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but I need to attend to family events. Know that our VUU commitment to fight racism remains clear and strong. We're at an important juncture, and we have work to do together. Send me a note if you need to talk. I love you all." And he gave you his email address, which is revandy, REVANDY, @VUU.org. This month's theme at VUU is the Sabbath. And even though this is a religious community, the holy connotation of the Sabbath is difficult for many of us. UUs are frequently survivors of other religious faiths that we've fled from. We try to run away from all of the God parts of religion while maintaining a community of the like-minded. So to reconcile this conflation of our liberal religious tradition with the holy concept of the Sabbath, I turn to my favorite Christ-loving atheist, Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt, in a speech at the General Assembly of the UUA, once said, "In order not to seem like a spiritual paraplegic to strangers trying to get a fix on me, I sometimes say I'm a Unitarian Universalist." You'll note he doesn't say he is a UU, just that sometimes he claims to be when it's socially convenient. But the label made sense for a reason. Many of the UU principles fall under the umbrella of humanism, of which Vonnegut was definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer. Although Vonnegut didn't believe in any particular religious faith, he spoke frequently about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. For example, in his book, Palm Sunday, he wrote, "I'm enchanted by the Sermon on the Mount. Being merciful, it seems to me, is the only good idea we have received so far. Perhaps we will get another idea that good by and by, and then we'll have two good ideas." I always think about Vonnegut's affection for the words of Jesus because it's a reminder that the rejection of the undisputed rightness of any one religious tradition does not mean that we can't learn from the best bits of all of them. As Vonnegut said, if what Jesus said was good and so much of it was beautiful, what does it matter if he was God or not? If Christ hadn't delivered the Sermon on the Mount with its message of mercy and pity, I wouldn't want to be a human being. I would just as soon be a rattlesnake. You see, it didn't matter to Kurt whether Jesus was God or not, because to him, it was clear that Jesus was not divine, but instead the most humane of human beings. And that's plenty worthy of praise in its own right. Thank you for coming. If you've got a chalice at home now, is a good time to grab it so that we can light it together. We kindle this flame, symbol of our faith, for the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of love, which calls us to work for justice.
Good morning. Welcome to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation and our live stream service. My name is Barbara, and I'm the worship associate for today's service. Thank you for Zooming with us today. We're glad that you have joined us from the comfort of your home, even though I'm quite sure all of us would prefer to be in each other's company in our sanctuary. Your willingness to continue to support us with your presence, even though it's not your preferred way of attending a VUU service, makes it all worthwhile. We're hoping all of you and your circle of family and friends are well and staying safe. Please know, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, we bid you welcome. For anyone who is new to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation and joining us for the first time today, we're glad you're here, and we invite you to get to know us now and also in the future. Today, our settled minister, the Reverend Dr. Andy Burnett, is out of the virtual pulpit, taking a well-deserved leave, and in his absence, you've already seen him, is one of our members and my friend, Adam Romney, who will discuss the ways we wholesale the Sabbath. He's up to his usual cleverness with this sermon for sure. And of course, I meant for my remarks to reflect on the Sabbath theme. However, given the tragedy in Minneapolis this week, I've decided to dedicate this space to remembering Mr. George Floyd, who senselessly lost his life face down on the street by another human who should have been there to save his life. What do we know about Mr. Floyd? Why should we know about him? I believe it's important to humanize the Black folks who have lost their lives to racism. When people ask me what they can do to heal systemic racism, I advise them that the first thing to do is to research those who have died. Know their names, know their character, make them human. This is what Mr. Floyd's family wants us to know about him. And guess what? He couldn't be more normal. He couldn't be more like you and me. He was 46 years old. He was a high school athlete who moved from Houston to Minneapolis to make a better life for himself. He was a good father. He had a big heart. He was a hard worker who was good with customers. His friends, lifelong friends, loved him and grieved his passing. His partner, Miss Courtney Ross, said about him, "He stood up for people. He was there for people when they were down. He loved people that were thrown away. We prayed over every meal. We prayed if we were having a hard time. We prayed if we were having a good time." End quote. Recently, I've been listening to rap music as a hobby, which I'll explain at a later time. One newly released song that I can't stop listening to is called PTSD by Chicago rapper G Herbo. The chorus goes like this. Don't worry, I'm not going to rap for you. I turn the news on when I smell death in the air. I proved you wrong. I made it out of here. I don't belong. I see my past everywhere. Don't stand too close to me. Eternal PTSD. I got a war zone inside of my head. I made it on my own. They said I'd be in jail or dead. I've seen my brothers fall over and over again. Don't stand too close to me. I got PTSD. When I hear those lyrics now, I think of the bystanders who watched in horror and who shouted for justice but were unheard. Imagine what's going on inside their heads right now. They are also victims. One can't bear such awful witness without being forever changed. I predict that in the coming weeks, we will begin to hear stories about Mr. Floyd that attempt to justify his death. It is what usually happens in these cases. The stories may focus on his life choices. They may focus on his physical condition and what made him fragile enough to not withstand the slight pressure of the knee pinning him to the pavement. Please do not reshare those stories on social media because they are just that, stories. Stay focused on Mr. Floyd, who was a man with a big heart, who was making a better life for himself, and that effort was cut short senselessly. Given previous incidents of the same kind of violence, we may see stories about the bravery and goodness of the person who listened to and ignored cries for breath, who listened to and ignored the cries of the bystanders calling for justice and mercy. Please do not reshare those stories on social media because they are also just stories. We don't know what was going on in this man's heart and mind while he kneeled for 8 minutes until the breath and heartbeat of another human ended. But the stories may attempt to make one of them right and one of them wrong. Do not be deceived. Do not be swayed. Do not be tempted to take sides. And despite the sage advice for healing racism and how to be an anti-racist you will most likely see on your social media feeds, please do not get overwhelmed and then stalled. Here's one powerful thing you can do. Know his name, Mr. George Floyd. And then research the names of the many others and know their names as well. Know their ages, know their families. Know their hopes and dreams. Know their humanness. Doing this one thing will make a difference in your heart, and then the other things will fall into place. Blessed be. And now we'll sing When Our Heart is in a Holy Place with Katie Seifert, Acting Director of Music Ministries, and David Berry, pianist. Thank you.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share our silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Hello, my name is Haley, and I am the Faith Formation Assistant here at Valley Unitarian Universalist. Today I will be reading I Am Peace, a book of mindfulness. There are times when I worry about what might happen next and what has happened before. There are thoughts in my head like rushing water, and I feel like a boat with no anchor, being carried away. I give myself a moment, I take a breath, and then I tell myself it'll be all right. I feel the ground beneath my feet, and I steady myself. And I start to notice the here and the now, and I begin to settle. My mind begins to clear. I am peace. I can watch my worries gently pop and disappear. I let things go. I can say what I feel out loud, and I know myself. I can share kindness with others, and I can make a difference. I can hug a tree and thank it for its beauty and its strength. I can connect to nature. I can watch the clouds make shapes against the sky, and I know wonder. I can taste and smell and touch and hear and see what is around me. I can use my senses. I can feel my breath fill my whole body. I tune into me. Now that the water is still, I have found my anchor and everything is all right. I don't need to worry about a before or after. I am in this moment. I am peace. I can now share my peace with others and hope that it is carried away for those who may need it. And I dream we are peace. Thank you, everyone.
We want to say thanks to all of those who have kept up their giving during these times. If you'd like to give, you can either text your donation to the number on the screen or mail us a check at BUU. However, if you're not able to continue your giving, please know that all we need from you is to let us know. We want to be there for each other in these difficult times. As always, thank you for all the many forms of your generosity. Now, we'll sing the hymn When I'm Frightened with Katie and David.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me? Stand by me willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me? Comfort me tenderly. Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
Thank you, Katie. That was beautiful. We take time now to settle ourselves. So if you can, uncross your legs and place your feet firmly on the floor or the ground, if you're lucky to be outside. Uncross your arms and place your hands in your lap. Take a breath in and then gently let that breath go. If you want, close your eyes and just settle yourself. There is work to be done, important work, and it will require self-reflection. Taking this time to settle ourselves together will allow us to have this Sabbath and then go out into the world with a fresh spirit. Now that you're settled, please join me in a moment of silence dedicated to Mr. George Floyd and the witnesses. Blessed be. And please enjoy Katie's version of Everything is Holy Now by Peter Mayer.
When I was a girl each week, we would go to church and pay attention to the priest. He would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two. Jesus made no water wine, and I remember feeling sad that miracles don't happen still. But now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Is not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. When holy waters were at best, it barely wets my fingertips. But now I have to hold my breath, like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven second rate, hand me down. But I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Breathe a question child's face and say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come and say it's not a sacrament. Tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood and saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world out there, heaven separate, hand me down, but I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. Everything, oh, everything is holy now. Everything is holy now.
Isn't Katie great? I really enjoy being able to see all of you, those of you who have your cameras on, sort of bob your head along and enjoy what she does. It's been quite a year. The last few months, we've had an impeachment trial, a global pandemic that's disrupted all of our lives, and an immense outpouring of rage in dozens of cities across this country. The big signs that society is stressed are open and obvious, but they play out in our personal lives in subtler ways that aren't meaningful because they're profoundly disconnecting. I haven't seen my coworkers in months, even though my office is busier than ever. I live alone, so I've had to learn to cut my own hair, which I would have described as an act of sheer lunacy as recently as February. And the institutions that form our day-to-day lives, like this church, can feel increasingly like a fantasy, something we say we do, but that's sort of abstracted from reality. So it's understandable so many people in our lives desperately want to feel like things are normal again, to go back to work, have weddings, graduation parties, and vacations like it's the halcyon days of 2019. But that's expressed itself in a way that's really kind of ugly. A push to reopen our country, our society, and our economy, even though things really have not improved much from where they were a month ago. Many of our friends and neighbors are effectively insisting that it's better for some of us to be 6 feet under than for all of us to temporarily be 6 feet apart. Egged on, of course, by leadership that sees chaos and division as politically advantageous. Unfortunately, this position is really about one thing: it's money. The reality is that we're being pushed to make difficult choices about each other's lives because preserving them is simply too expensive. That's what I want to discuss here today. What causes people who collectively choose currency over living creatures? Especially those who pride themselves on being the truest and staunchest believers of God, those who define as evangelicals first, Americans second. It's not difficult to see the contradiction in claiming to be a follower of Christ, but also to decide that some level of human suffering is acceptable in the name of commerce. For those of us at this service, it's very difficult how one can claim to celebrate the sanctity of life while choosing to save the stock market instead. But I think that's much easier to comprehend if we examine the religious symbology behind economic activity. See, money at its core is really very weird. It's simultaneously ephemeral, but the realest thing about all of our lives. By itself, it can't ever make us happy, but the lack of it can make us miserable. And every decision we make and every opportunity we have is shaped by how much of it we have and how much we think we can acquire in the future. But it's mostly invisible. It controls our lives imperceptibly and from afar, with, as Adam Smith famously wrote, an invisible hand. In this sense, money is a little bit like God. After all, who does that invisible hand directing our lives belong to? For decades, our money hasn't even been tied to physical objects. It's not backed by gold or silver or anything else. Instead, it's reinforced by collective belief. And like any sacred idea, money is endowed with magical powers, not tied to the physical universe that everyone believes in. And yeah, everyone includes you. So here's an example. This is a crisp $50 bill. I pulled it from the bank yesterday. We can all see this is just a piece of paper. It's a physical object, but because all of us agree I can buy things with it, nice dinners, gasoline, and so on, it has a different role in our imagination. This is not a piece of paper. like this one, even though they are in reality physically the same. Instead, this is an object with special powers to be transformed into any other thing I desire. This bill is also immortal. Every physical product, like our bodies, is subject to the ravages of age and time. We all deteriorate, become less sturdy. Our bodies break down, our homes need repair. We lose the power and vigor of our youth. It's an immutable law of nature. Not for this. It spends the same, almost no matter what I do to it. If I fold it, these creases don't matter. If I crumple it so it's crushed, can never be crisp again, it's still good as new if I take it to the store, try to spend it. Even if I totally destroy it, I can take both halves to a bank tomorrow. It'll be exchanged for a new one. This one, I'm gonna mail it to VUU today. I'm positive it will be accepted. Physical object can be totally destroyed, but its social function remains unchanged. So while you and I are mortal, this bill will never die. It exists as a sublime object outside of time, and we treat it as such. The social reality surrounding money, that it lives in a sublime space where the physical world can't touch it, shapes how we think about it as a society. And it can explain why we're willing to risk the expendable and replaceable people to save a higher power, the sublime, the almighty. Money, like any ephemeral idea that's bigger than all of us, like God, freedom, or our country, can become an idea that is worth dying for. It's a literary trope that people seek to accumulate enough money to become immortal for a reason. We hope by getting enough of it, we'll adopt its properties, and we too will become timeless. That conflation of wealth and godliness has been baked into American religious thought from the very beginning of our society. Puritanism in Great Britain was a movement about purifying the Church of England of all of its remaining Catholic influences. For many Puritans, the primary complaint was that the Church of England was not Protestant enough. One of the examples was a persistent bristling against the 17th century Catholic doctrine that all human interests and activities were within the compass of religious thought, including business transactions. As part of the purging of the influence of Catholicism, many Puritans wanted to establish a society where clergy did not have the authority to directly regulate and manage the economic affairs of the faithful. In this sense, Plymouth Colony was both an economic enterprise and a religious concept. It was a religious refuge, but also a place for the faithful to find their fortunes, free of the strictures of the religion they rejected. From our country's founding, worship of the divine and commercial freedom have been commingled as aspirational ideas. Similarly, Calvinists gave us the concept of the elect. Although who was saved and who was damned was predestined, evidence that you were among God's chosen could be found in how professionally successful you were on earth. Obviously, this creates some melding of professional and religious interests. If you're worried you might not be destined for heaven, you can buy yourself a little comfort by making yourself as successful as possible in the material realm to prove you're one of the elect. German philosopher Max Weber studied this phenomenon and credited Calvinism for the later development of capitalism in America, North America, and Northern Europe by providing a theological basis to depart from the early church's teachings that usury and profit were inherently sinful. The acquisition of wealth itself becomes a religious activity because it demonstrates your fundamental virtue. Worshiping God and the accumulation of wealth can become one and the same thing. Something we see all the way through today with the popularity of the prosperity gospel in modern evangelical circles. This conflation of worship and the dollar isn't a new phenomenon. It's been with us from the start. It's been baked into the society well before any of us were born. But here's the thing. I don't think anyone ever actually makes the conscious choice, a decision to worship money as a sublime object, to say that the economy is at least as valuable as human lives. That's important to remember when we talk to our friends and neighbors who are currently demanding that life return to normal immediately. Because the sublime lives in a specific mental space of which we aren't totally aware and can't always control. Instead, this orientation towards money lives in a space of pre-thought. It's in the realm of ideology itself. Our personal ideology consists of all the things we insist on believing, despite any and all evidence to the contrary. A lot of religious thought's explicitly ideological. We don't believe in our ideas because they are true. Instead, they're true because we believe them. Faith that anything exists outside of time and physical reality requires us to make a leap outside the realm of our senses and our common sense. And it's that leap of faith that makes those beliefs sacrosanct. As Soren Kierkegaard wrote, belief is offensive to reason, since it only exists in the face of the absurd. In order to access the sublime, we have to, at some level, take leave of our senses and embrace the irrational. Sublime is a powerful allure, in part because it represents a rare space of shared agreement in spite of reason. We can all agree on an illusion, like money, more easily than we can agree on an objective fact. The illusion doesn't have to be perpetually reevaluated in the face of new evidence. It's simply true. And that shared illusion, because it's central to our connection to one another, itself becomes sacred. And there's a story in the Jewish faith of a rabbi telling a young pupil the legend of a prophet who receives a divine vision. So enraptured by the story, the young pupil eagerly asks the rabbi, "Is this true? Did it really happen?" And the rabbi responds, "It probably didn't really happen, but it is true." Freud observed these shared myths among people are actually more real than reality. Like the rabbi says, they're true even if they never really took place. The stories we tell ourselves are more powerful than the literal truth, and we devote more energy to propping them up. Their untruth, paradoxically, is what makes them sacred. In this headspace, the contradiction between what you can observe and what you know to be real isn't a reason to abandon your ideology. Instead, it's a marker of how seriously you take your beliefs. The zealot, the true believer, insists he believes in the illusion more strongly than anybody else. And in that sense, the contradiction between saying that you have to believe in the sanctity of life, but also that we need to return to normal life as quickly as possible, is not a reason to question your beliefs. Instead, it's proof of how deeply committed the ideologue is to their worldview. It's no accident that the first university to insist all of its students return to campus was Liberty University in Virginia, run by Jerry Falwell Jr., a frequent center of conservative religious thought. The demonstration that the bare protection of life is trumped by the resumption of normal activity is most potent when done by those who profess to be the most faithful. And strength of the conviction renders the conflict between two diametrically opposed ideas invisible. The true believer can no longer see how much energy they invest in pretending that everything they believe is internally consistent. The entangling power of that ideological contradiction is why you can't argue someone out of what they think, oppositional tactics. I'm sure we've all had those frustrating conversations with our politically conservative friends and family about the ethics of reopening our country. They can't see the tension between their professed love of life and their desire for a full return to economic activity. To do so would be too threatening to how they see themselves. That re-entrenchment and recommitment to incompatible concepts is itself the act of faith that gives them community with one another. In this sense, as people, our most treasured ideas and ideals are ultimately negotiable when maintaining them threatens our place with our family, our friends, and our peers. Given a choice between the divine, the sublime, and our tribe, we'll wholesale the Sabbath itself in service of another idea. And I think that's what we're seeing collectively, socially today. So what are we, as UUs, supposed to do when we witness our friends and neighbors asking that we all expose ourselves to risk, something we know to be inhumane? First of all, I think it's helpful to gain some empathy for those we disagree with by recognizing that we succumb to the contradictions of ideological thinking too, and that drives other people to be frustrated with us. Right before all of society shut down, there was a show at the Mesa Arts Center called the Deplorables Comedy Show. This was a right-wing Make America Great Again rally masquerading as a comedy event. I actually paid money to sit there and see what that group of people says to each other when they don't expect a liberal to be there. And trust me, this would not have been my first choice had I realized it was the last live event I could attend for months, but I was there, I went. I could go my entire life without seeing Tommy Lauren live again, but I did this to gain an appreciation that so much of the Deplorables' anger expressed at these events is driven by their sensitivities to the conflicts in our ideologies. Because as much as we like to think of ourselves as rational and thoughtful people, we too are prone to embrace radical acts of faith in our belief systems. So as an example, I want to give you two ideas that I personally believe. So I'm the villain here. I'm confident most of you believe these two, though. First, I believe that at our core, every human being is the same. They have the same inherent dignity and worth. All races and peoples share the common bond of humanity. They're equal. Second, I also believe ethnic and cultural minorities have distinctive cultures and histories that we must remain mindful of and respect. Despite what we share, I can never truly understand the experience of being a minority in the world and everything that entails. For me, both of these ideas are true, but they also conflict. I believe we're all the same and totally different at the same time. And these are contradictory rules that I can navigate because they make sense to me, but represent an impenetrable thicket to the unconverted. What I learned from my 2.5 hours sitting there with the deplorables is that what they see in us are social rules that they don't understand. And their next assumption is either that we are dumb or manipulative because we pretend there is no contradiction, when to them it's blindingly obvious. I sat around and talked to a few of them after the show. They assumed I was one of them. And I came to understand that these deplorables know with a metaphysical certitude that we have a game around race and identity with unsolvable rules, but it's a game that they are always destined to lose. And I think that's why you see them reflexively defend those in power during weeks like this one. If they don't understand society's rules, then they identify strongly with others who clearly don't either. And I think our path forward in getting a better understanding of our neighbors isn't to deny that these philosophical contradictions exist, but to embrace that life is full of them. And that's okay. We all have to navigate them together. I'll posit that all of Western society lives in conflicts between values that we treasure. To illustrate, I'll talk about differences between our Bill of Rights and the Ten Commandments. The tension between these documents represents ideological tension that we share with our conservative neighbors because we all live with these same rules, just like our collective belief that money is real. So for example, the 9th commandment prohibits bearing false witness. There's virtually no moral system that condones wanton lying, but our freedom of speech protects our right to speak our opinions, even when they're wrong or potentially in bad faith. The 6th Amendment prohibits us from killing, but our 2nd Amendment protects our right to maintain lethal force. And the freedom of religion is at its core the legally protected right to worship false idols. The force of our civil law system, even though it explicitly protects religion, in many ways exists to preserve our right to sin against the sensibilities of others. And collectively, we invest an immense amount of energy in maintaining both of these contradictory systems. Both sinning and worship are socially sacred. Modern life requires us to constantly live in this space of conflicting demands and requirements that we've deeply internalized for so long, they become invisible to us. So don't be angry with your neighbors, sympathize with them. Like everyone else, they inherited a bunch of rules they can't possibly decode or comprehend. They didn't write them. Of course, they're angry and confused. And when we see anger, I think it's important first to ask of ourselves why the anger exists in the first place. Because the bridge to resolving conflicts always starts with understanding. We do have an interesting model for this mode of thought, but it's an unusual one for you to use. It's the New Testament. In my view, Jesus was a revolutionary because his message of love and forgiveness symbolizes an entirely new mode of dealing with the other. The 10 Commandments and our laws, they provide a list of prohibitions. They say, thou shalt not. And by contrast, Jesus gives us a positive command to love thy neighbor, a command that prohibits precisely nothing, but instead it calls for an activity beyond the confines of the law. We're told that we should perpetually strive to always do more to love everyone. And here's the rub, that means everyone. The message is that nobody is truly beyond the good. No one is so radically evil, capricious, revolting, or disgusting that they should be denied the love of their neighbors. Even as we actively fight to make the world a better place, we have to provide a path back for those who are still locked in a prison of bad and hateful ideas. If we believe that we understand something that others do not, we must sympathize with their delusions before we condemn them for them. While maybe we intellectually know that our money is just a piece of paper, it doesn't mean we can't understand why it seems sublime to others. Really, this unconditional command to love everybody is the philosophical root of the UU's third principle, which is acceptance of one another and the encouragement of spiritual growth, even the deplorable. even those who believe in things that we find abysmal. And here's the contradiction we must embrace in order to access the sublime of love for each other. Even though I despise much of what you believe, I love you anyway. No one is outside the scope of those who deserve love, and our first orientation towards everyone we meet must be sympathy. I think this idea was best expressed by Leo Tolstoy in his last novel, Voskresenie. It's a Russian word which is often translated as resurrection, but that also means Sunday or the Sabbath. It's a book about the crushingly inhumane conditions of the Russian criminal justice system. And as Tolstoy wrote, the whole trouble lies in that people think there are conditions excluding the necessity of love and their intercourse with man, but such conditions do not exist. Things may be treated without love. One may chop wood, make bricks, forge iron without love, but one can no more deal with people without love than one can handle bees without care. You see, Sabbath isn't a day, it's an orientation to life itself. It's how we treat one another, with love, unconditionally, and because we choose to. Love is the doctrine of our congregation. It's what we gather on this day to celebrate. Our Sabbath is too valuable to bargain for. It's our ethical identity. So others might be willing to wholesale theirs, but we shouldn't be willing to wholesale ours. Now, we'll have our final hymn with Katie, One More Step.
One more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us, and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word, till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more prayer, we will say one more prayer, till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song, we will sing one more song, till every song is sung by everyone. We'll sing one more song.
And if you lit a chalice, feel free to grab it so we can extinguish it now. If you didn't light a chalice, please join me as we say the words together. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion. Until we meet again.
Life can be hard and it can be confusing, especially when we're disconnected from one another physically. But crisis gives us an opportunity for reinvention. It's a natural point where old things end and new things begin. Collectively, we have the opportunity to create who we want to be in the new world that's waiting for us. And it's my sincere hope that we can treat the months that follow not as a time of despair, but as an opportunity for renewed hope and faith in one another. Let's do it together, eventually, when it's safe. Go in peace, dear friends.